there. My name is Kevin Smith, and I'm the owner, president, general manager, chief cook and bottle washer of a company called Marathon Dynamics that for 20 plus years now has helped runners improve through bringing out the best in them in mind, body, and spirit. So for today, as part of our Be the Best Runner You Can Be seminar series, we'd like to talk, for those in the fold, or hopefully soon will be, about the nitty-gritty details about the workouts themselves. Now, within our system, there's a lot to it, but there's three key runs that drive, depending on the person, 80 or 90% of your potential improvement. Okay? Your success with those three makes an enormous difference, no matter what you choose to do or are able to do with the rest of things. So in that 80-20 type of idea, these are the ones you want to focus on. And they are the long, slow distance run. They are something that we have called an O.M.P. Audience, does anyone know what the acronym O.M.P. stands for? Hey, we've got a keener. Ordinary mortal pace, that's right. That is otherwise known in many other training circles perhaps as kind of a steady state, could be called a threshold type run, okay? That's what it would be analogous to. And then some form of intensity work, which changes at different points in the season. Those are your three building blocks. Now, with intensity, many of the people we work with, we see you. That's what we meet with you to do. We work on the intensity stuff on a weekly basis. Or in your plans, it's probably the one we give the most detail to. So, you know, you're in better shape perhaps to do those on your own if you're not meeting with us to do them. And the other thing is, most of the people we work with, not all, but most, are at least 5K runners, predominantly 10K, even more so half marathon, and perhaps even as much or more so marathon runners. So the importance of speed work declines a little as you might figure, as your goal distance increases, okay? Or you could look at it as the relative importance of the other runs increases as you go further with your goal race distance. So for people training for half marathons and marathons, these other two, ordinary mortal pace and long slow distance, in distance they make up at least 50% usually of your week, sometimes even more. But in importance to your development as a runner, it could be much more than that, weighted more than that. So they really are important, and we thought we'd deal with O.M.Ps first. Okay, the reason we call it ordinary mortal pace has a whole history story dating back into the mid to late 1990s. So I'm not going to go all the way back there and tell you about it, but essentially it's do everything you can running-wise, effort-wise, intensity-wise, without trying to be a superhero, without trying to reach beyond your current capabilities, okay? So it's that up on the edge, but within myself type of nomenclature. That's where we settled on that term, ordinary mortal pace. Now, why are they so important? I hinted at it a little just a minute ago, but to be more specific, for race distances like half marathon and marathon, your O.M.P. is a weekly visit to just ahead or just behind your current goal, assumed or predicted, goal race pace, okay? And it's an essential part of a lot of programs there are a lot of other programs that's missing. There's a lot of focus on the long run. Sometimes they work on some speed. But this isn't I came up with this back in the mid-90s as my own training and worked it into the system that we built. And so it's been there for a long time as a staple of what we do. And the reason, I'll skip down here, that we use it and we find it works is that some of you at the highest point of your volume may beg to differ with us on this, but we actually espouse a fairly, in the great panorama of marathon training, low volume approach to distance running, believe it or not, okay? There's a lot of schools of thought out there and that have been there for decades that you shouldn't even bother training for a marathon unless you're starting at 100K a week and go up from there every week. That's That's a real marathoner. That's what they are purporting. So, and half marathoner, it's not like you go down half of that. They knock off 10 or 20% at most, and they're still doing well over 100K a week for the most part, okay? So because we have chosen or we find it successful or more doable for most runners, most people that have lives and or other interests or a predisposition, shall we say, to injury, we find that this sort of it's the best of all worlds, okay? We can get away, if we run really smartly on the running we do, we can get away with not necessarily doing a ton of volume, okay? But that means that this really has to be done well, because if you're doing that not really well, you're also going low volume, what usually will happen on race day is not good things, okay? So that's why it's so important. And yeah, it is either the first or second priority of all runners, trainings plan that are training for things from 10K to up to marathon. For a 10K, you could argue that the speed work, certain types of it, are probably the most important mover and shaker, with O.M.P. a close second, okay? For half marathon, I would argue that it's the most important. And then long run perhaps would be the second most important, trailed by speed. And then for marathoning, the long run probably wins out, but O.M.P. is a close, trailing behind, because whatever endurance you have, if you want to hold a certain pace, that's where the O.M.P. comes from. So it's really important. Does that make sense? Okay, so we know what it is, what the acronym spells, why it's important. Now let's dig in quickly to what getting A+ on your O.M.Ps entails. Okay, first and foremost, and this is something that we always struggle with busy lives doing, it presumes that you will have a complete day of rest, or aerobic cross training, perhaps low to moderate volume, or easy running, again, low or moderate volume and intensity, the day before you try an O.M.P. run. Okay, so that has to do with scheduling and looking ahead and planning ahead so that you don't end up doing a long run the day before an O.M.P. or speed work necessarily the day before an O.M.P., because it won't happen very well if it does at all, and you are slightly raising the risk of injury, okay? So that's important before and after. Try and give yourself the crouch, so you can jump high for the O.M.P. A warm-up before, really critical, especially if you aren't currently 20 to 21 years old. Some are closer than others. But I would argue that even for the 21-year-olds, somewhere sooner than you think, you will join the ranks of the slightly older, and the warm-up will become increasingly important. When I was young, I maybe bounced around for stretch, and out I went, and I was in mode on my run within seconds or a minute or two. I was there. That doesn't happen anymore, okay? So what we're saying is, if you have a 10K O.M.P. scheduled, we're asking you to do an extra, if all systems are going, you have the time, 1 or 2K of easy jog warm-up. Perhaps that just loops around and ends where you were going to start anyways, okay? Really slow, at fastest slow distance pace. Perhaps even slower, okay? You're just starting the engine, warming it up, the old analogy in the car in the driveway in the cold day. That's important because you want to start slow, but you don't want to start too slow, because O.M.Ps are fast. you don't want to give away too much of your slack, if you will, early in the run. So that's a good idea, and you can add it to your run total, but I would never average it into your run. That's just, so treat that separate. Okay, I always say I'm a miles person, I know, old school, but I always do a mile warm-up, or sometimes half a mile if I'm pressed, and I include it in the total, but I don't include it in my stats for pacing. Okay, so yeah, so you want to do a bit of a warm-up, ideally extra, or if you're pressed for time, part of it is okay under this, in a pinch. That's before. When you're done, a real A+ Dynamo runner will do striders. Those 100 to sometimes up to 150 meter gentle accelerations that many of us do before intensity work, you should also be adding those in when the going's good, I guess you could say, when biomechanically you feel up to it, after your O.M.Ps. And I mean like 60 seconds or less than 2 minutes after, pretty much before you give up on going in and finishing everything from your run. You got to kind of strike while the iron's hot and the engine's still running. So striders are a great idea at the end of your O.M.Ps. And another crafty little I don't know if it's a concession, a cheat code, life hack, an O.M.P hack. I'm not sure what you might call it, but I've certainly found it useful, and many other runners that we've coached now have. It's discretionary. You don't have to do this, but we've found that, especially for longer O.M.Ps, a very brief, like on the clock break for 30 up to a minute at the halfway point or somewhere around there, if you'd like, really helps, because it allows you that moment to stretch out that niggle, simmer the heart rate down, collect your breathing to focus, especially for that negative split. And if it's the length of a long stoplight, it doesn't, as you've probably seen and heard in all the running magazines and research, that doesn't quantifiably degrade the quality of the workout, okay? If it's short, okay? Or a couple of them if they're very short, but you're on the clock. These are not full-fledged breaks where you just put your feet up, okay? So a short break and maybe up to a minute or longer if it's a really long O.M.P later in the season, okay? And of course, this is one of the staples of all your training, especially O.M.Ps, at least a slight negative split, where essentially your second half is going to be run at a pace and in a time faster than your first half, okay? And to clarify, we don't mean a huge difference necessarily, unless it's a certain type of O.M.P run. Generally, it's just a few ticks, just a few seconds per kilometer, 3, 4, 5 seconds a kilometer, okay? So that means that you don't want to be too far, you want to be behind, but you don't want to be too far behind at halfway. And then you want to see if, on the day I'm up to it, if I can reel those seconds that I gave away back in on the way home and run a negative split. Okay? You can give yourself a little more slack on longer ones than on shorter ones, so that's what we're alluding to here. And then I guess, and this is important for long runs, important for speed work if you want to look at it that way, what I call the shape of a workout, the shape of a run, is where, and when we're looking for how to shape and design our runs, perfect form would have a slight negative split, front half to back half, but it would also have the slowest K of your run first. And at least for the formal workout, you could do a cool down. That's an option as well when you're done. It doesn't have to be very long. But for the ending of your run, it should be the fastest. I don't mean the fastest you can run, possibly, but the fastest of that run, K to finish, or mile, okay? So that gives you the perfect shape. That is the best way to execute that workout, the least effort, if you will, to get the most bang for your buck. Make sense? Okay? And yeah, a couple of last minute points there would be, adjust your pace to external conditions. I still have to remind people of this. It blows my mind that they see that stat. 4 minutes and something, 5 minutes and something, 6 minutes and something per K, and they do everything under come hell or high water to hit that split, those pace times. That's not the case. In fact, I turn it around and say, if you think about it, it's extremely rare that you should ever hit that pace, because here in Canada, the heart of the season of the summer is extremely hot. The heart of the winter season is extremely cold and slippery. Oftentimes coastal on the water, we're windy. And that's just external. What about you? You have ups and downs days, okay, and you're not always on top of your game. The workouts are based on top of your game, internal and external. So you really should be behind these targets most of the time. Maybe not much, but certainly behind. Okay, so give yourself the accountability and the flexibility to adjust those times. Okay. That's important, because otherwise I find people work the O.M.Ps. Whenever people start talking about O.M.P runs as tempo runs, you know who you are, you know when it's happened. I mean the whole friggin' thing. That's when you know you're working too hard on your O.M.Ps, at least that day. So yes, question here? Yes? Well, for most people, it means, oh yeah, we'll handle it at the end, but it means that it's only scant seconds away from it's a little slower than your current half marathon pace. I mean, 6 or 7 or 8 seconds slower than your half marathon pace, and a little faster than your marathon pace. It's always right in the middle there. So that's what I meant about being close. It's the closest relative run. All your other runs are high and low, away from. Hell yeah, always. Yeah, you've only been with us for 20 years. Hey, we're learning well. Anyways, that's the gist of it, all right? I know, you're heckling me. Oh, there is lots of stretching. Well, I can't put everything on the board. We're talking on the next slide, and that's our good segue into it. And yes, the O.M.P plus, that version we've added lately in the last few years, that's really, we only add that after we take true tempos away, and it's a way every couple of weeks of tempo in disguise, because we're asking you to run basically tempo type running within the O.M.P on the second half. Okay, so that's why we not only take it, that big break we suggest, don't say, oh, I'm feeling fine because I was going slow. No, take it. You'll need it, trust me, on the second half of those O.M.Ps. Okay, so very quickly, second half of this segment of our talk is not to go here. I'm going to go the other way. Is long run mastery. Okay, that's the staple as for the half marathon, but even more so for the marathon. And this one we'll talk about the stretching question from the back. Whence to grow on, whence to grow long. Very quickly, let's just run down. These are not in any particular order. Okay, these are just rapid fire things to think about, things that you probably should do if you want to have successful long runs over time. Alternate the routes. Don't always do the same one or even the same two. If you do cover only a couple of routes, like you have one flat one, one hilly one, do them in reverse if you can do like a different loop, because we have certain loop courses. Out and back doesn't make a whole lot of difference that way. And yeah, topographically, as I'm saying, you probably want to be always alternating as best you can between flat predominantly and hilly predominantly each week. Okay? Here it comes again, that short mid-run break. Not a bad idea. Okay? Chances are too, without long runs, they get up to 2 hours, 3 hours, over 3 hours in some cases. You need a break for any number of reasons. Okay? But I will say this. Whenever you take a break on a long run, you are, the meter's running, you're on the clock. One of the most impressive things that was conveyed to me since the advent of the Garmin, when people send me files about their workouts, and they say, oh, I was fine on my long run, why was it so much harder on race day? Well, if we delve into your workout files, we see that your elapsed time for your long run on most Sundays is a cool 15 minutes or longer than your running time, because you had to take that break, and then my running partner had to take that break, and when we met, we saw these other people coming the other way, and we stopped to chat. That's all well and good, but that devalues what we're trying to do on the long run. There is, a little break is okay, a lot of break is not, okay? And the rule of thumb, I don't have it on here, but I will in the follow-up, is up to a minute of break per hour. That's the gold standard. Not many can keep it, but that's what you're striving for. So it's a 2-hour run. You can take a break, sure, up to 2 minutes. 3 hours, go ahead, knock yourself out. 3-minute break. Okay, so that's the idea behind the breaks. They do serve a purpose. They allow you to stretch out, topically, ad hoc as you need to. Maybe a washroom break, maybe a water break that you're not on the move for. But speaking of on the move, that's the other aspect of what you're doing on your long runs. Really, and I mean to the nitty-gritty details, the rudiments, practice your logistics of race day fueling, eating, hydrating, okay? Both on your long run, at your long run pace, but also on those every once a month or so, we have you doing race pace workouts for your halves and for your fulls. Practice the mechanics at that intensity. It's very different than running at long run. It should be very different than running at long run speed. Sometimes you're fine chewing on, sucking back Gatorade and gels at long run speed. But when you knock it up 20, 30 seconds a kilometer, all of a sudden it's a little trickier an equation. So you have to practice to get, like anything else, good at it. Okay? Ideally run with others. That's pretty much a no-brainer. We like to say everybody has different social orientation with running, and that's fine. Don't change it too much. Work with what you got and, serve your social master in that way. But we like to say there are 2 times when you probably want to run with others, at least a partner, if not a group. And that's when you're running really short and fast or really long and slow. Okay? Again, you're going to have the odd long run solo or perhaps speed work like I do most of the time. But in the middle, that's probably the best spot, where you're running moderate pace and moderate distance. That's probably the best time for solo running, okay? But yeah, when you want to group up, long runs are great because passes the time a lot quicker. This is an overlooked one for a lot of people, beginner or experienced. spend some time psyching up. I mean, we do it for races, no problem, because we attach so much importance to them. But second half, we'll say, to put a number on it, second half of your season, those long runs can be really, they're something. They're an event. You need to get psyched. You can't just wake up, go check your, flip on your computer, check your training plan, see what's, 36 kilometers. I wasn't really thinking about that. It's too much to process, okay? So you need psych up time. You need those little wig outs where you're thinking about, oh yeah, this weekend, what route are we gonna do? You visualize, you get there so you've seen it in your mind's eye before you get there so that it doesn't shock you and scare you when you're suddenly presented with it on the weekend, okay? A very good idea, both for racing, it kind of goes without saying, but borrow from race day and psych up a little, visualize ahead of time for your long runs, okay? Review what you're gonna do. Rehearse to take, again, borrow from racing, a little bit of 1 to 2 day lead up is another good idea for your long runs. Check your equipment, make sure you have get your gels, your carb loading, reload stuff, your hydration strategy in place. You know, check the weather a day or two, not obsessively, but check it, know what you're up against, so you're ready beforehand. Makes a big difference on the run, and the better you do in training, the better you'll be ready for race day. So always a good idea. Again, negative split. Where I said slightly in the O.M.Ps, that's ideal. On long runs, make it more than slightly. Big negative split, okay? And the reason there is because in the O.M.P, you're skirting, you're just under what we call your anaerobic threshold, where all of a sudden your energy is now going to be predominantly chemical as opposed to aerobically supplied. And that's like that's an emergency brake. You can do it, but it's very much harder to do and only for a limited amount of time. With long runs, you shouldn't ever be hitting that lactate threshold, so you have more flexibility. So make it easier earlier, and the whole time passage thing just goes so much faster, okay? The quicker you're up on pace, the longer the run is gonna feel to your body and to your mind. So always negative split. We just really loosey-goosey, chat it up. You'll find there should be a lot of conversation with those people you're running with when you're on your long run, at least on the way out. If you can swing it, on the way back too, okay? Take time, especially if you're on your own, but even with others, for that meditative kind of on the run, yoga thing happening. It really, for some, it sounds a little airy-fairy, but it's really important. It can make such a difference to drop like biofeedback-wise, to drop your heart rate, realign your form, settle things down, your breathing calms down, you get your breathing deeper into your belly. That is a remark. It's actually pretty cool. It's a neat thing. It's like meditation on the run. It doesn't happen always, and it's sometimes difficult to achieve depending on how you're doing and what those around you are doing pace-wise, but it's worth striving for. It can lead to runner's high, those little moments where you get feeling like, I could do anything. I could pick it up and it would feel easier, that kind of stuff. So always a good idea to be looking for that. And yeah, an aspect of that would be form resets. Those that run with us on Sundays, especially with me on Sunday, you'll see me do that a lot. I'll just be out there and start to feel a little tension in the shoulders, tighten the arms, fingers, hands. So I'll just take a moment. I'll literally lift the hands up, shake it down, and just shake my arms out as I run. And then slowly get them back into gear, and everything feels looser and more relaxed. So that's always a good thing. It can happen every K or two, or just a few times a run, a couple of times a run. But you'll find that really drops the whole effort down, okay? Striders at the finish, like we've said with O.M.Ps, same idea. It's a lot harder sometimes at the end of a really long run to rally, to go out and do those striders. But anybody that's done it has usually come back to me and said, that was a really good suggestion. I've kind of made that part of my routine. It was hard at first, but now it's almost second nature. And it really does make a difference. The whole idea there is that as you finish a long run, you're tired, right? Your muscles are especially on their last contractions, they're really getting tired and they stiffen up quickly. And if that's the last, sort of borrowing from psychology, the primacy and recency effects, those are what we remember more. Well, our body's somewhat similar that way. It will remember old stuff, really old stuff, and it'll also remember the last thing it did. And if that's what it walks around with for the next 2 days, remembering that's the last significant thing it did, it's very hard to to go to the next challenge. Like it stays there. There's a certain lingering. Whereas this kind of shakes, they're doing the strider, shakes that, you know, that cloak off. It basically hastens recovery. So it's a really good idea. And the last thing I wanted to mention to you guys, jumping on to near the end, is the post-run, that window of opportunity from a few minutes to really a couple of hours or even the rest of the day. That's why it's a good idea to run your long runs in the morning. On the weekends, perhaps, is the best time. And this is a neat little forward and back routine, okay? It happens from the moment you truly finish your long run. These are your priorities in that order, and it goes all the way out, and it comes back that same way. So first thing you do after you finish, you probably have something you need to stretch right away. Go to it. Stretch for a minute or two, nothing long, but get to the, you know, the 80-20. Get to the things that need it, okay, first. And then as soon as you've stretched, get moving again at a walk. Again, it doesn't have to be long, 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, but walk around, drop the heart rate, get some blood flow happening. It's important, okay, at a walk. Next thing, because you've been doing it on the run, get a quick hit of drink, of something, sports drink, water, whatever you have here, or both, okay? But really it's just an exaggerated sip, nothing much more. And hopefully then some food, a snack is probably all you're gonna feel you can get down in the next 20 minutes or something, but do that, okay? And if you can get some kind of protein in that snack, that's probably a good idea because you got more than micro trauma to all the muscles after a long run, trust me. So that's the next thing. And then you're probably home and it's been half hour, or, you know, get onto a soak. Whether that means a super hot bath or perhaps super cold ice. That's up to you, okay? There's been a lot of study, but not a lot of conclusion about which is better, quite frankly, and this is going back decades now. So you have to make that call. Which one is best for you? I know for me, I always go the hot bath routine unless I have a really important niggle.